how about we dive right in? Our first subject is getting to market quickly. So I think we can talk a little bit about this. Let's start with Jim. So when getting to market, there's kind of two sections. Let's start with the first one. Which market? Jim, can you talk a little bit about what advice you give someone who is in the early development stages and trying to get to market quickly?
Right. Well, from our 11 years of experience in mentoring software startups, our advice is to find and focus on a fast, emphasize fast, first market for adoption. And the reason for doing this is speed is as critical as is cash for a startup, maybe even more so. And so whatever's selected as that first market will be critical to the impact of this speed of customer acquisition. So a couple points here that I want to make on this subject. Of course, any startup wants to establish a beachhead of paying customers as soon as possible. Why do you do that? Well, obviously you want to generate early cash, but it's also important for learning and creating credibility for additional prospecting and hopefully also for potential investors through testimonials and references. Our advice is in early customer acquisition to focus on a given market rather than acquiring early customers across multiple markets. That's perhaps easier to do, but it's not better. And obviously by market, I'm really talking about a vertical market that will give you replicable use cases. So what's this thing about speed? Well, there are a couple reasons to do it. First, in terms of the functionality, you can now have focused functionality rather than having to service use cases across multiple markets. You're going to learn faster. Remember, this is all a concept around speed. And your selling efficiency is going to be improved because you're going to learn the lingo of that common set of prospects. So your messaging is going to be better, faster, and you're going to gain testimonials that are going to resonate with additional prospects and then hopefully with investors. So to Dustin's question, which market? How do you identify a market that's going to be fast? Most important is that your value proposition is seen by those prospects and customers as a need to have and not a nice to have, not just a nice to have. Naturally, most entrepreneurs are going to be convinced that what they are offering is a need to have. And you kind of have to calm that thought down and really get out into the marketplace and get validation from prospects and customers that what you're doing is something that they need to have to improve the performance of their organization. Second, the decision maker has to be accessible to you. And you have reason to believe in this market, decision-making can be fast. If you're having to go through multiple people to get to the decision maker, obviously that just slows down the whole process. And it's less important that big market or your ultimate market. Again, you're looking to create this beachhead, you're looking to create references and testimonials, create cash.
Oops.
Is and do what you need to do to get those first customers very, very quickly so you can start the whole process. This doesn't necessarily need to be done through price. And as a last point, we kind of encourage people to stay away from enterprise. Enterprise is slow.
Yeah, so I was going to ask two follow-up questions. So the first is a quick one. When you say fast, a lot of people, you can define fast differently. What do you think is sort of the bottom? You know, we've spent too little time investigating, and then on the high end, at what point are you advising someone and you say, well, you're just waffling now, or you picked a market that isn't fast enough? Do you have any general guidelines of what to look for in terms of calendar time?
Well, in the startup world, not more than a couple months. And, you know, early on, the best sellers I've worked with distinguish between a yes, no, and a maybe, and the maybes they stay away from. A couple other quick thoughts are, you know, find a champion early and have that champion tell you why it's a need to have for their company.
Yeah. So then at least you're learning. What about, so I know Minnesota, we have a lot of healthcare companies here. We've got a lot of SCM supply chain. We've got a lot of consumer packaged goods. And these are companies that take a while to make decisions, right? If you are in a startup that has a product that is primarily marketed to one of those big B2B retailers or B2B healthcare companies, do you have any tips on how to find a fast first market? Because I'm sure there's someone out there who's selling to an insurance market going, I don't know how to do that.
Right. If you can, smaller customers. I'm working and mentoring a health tech company right now that's working in the insurance market, but they were able to find some smaller insurance companies who are just going to be quicker. The entrepreneur was able to actually create dialogues directly with the CEO because it's a smaller company. Decision making's faster.
Yep, self-insured is another way to go. And I've seen several medical companies pivot into consumer sales,
right,
where they're not keeping PHI, not to as their final goal, but as a way to establish that beachhead and start getting at least feedback from the end consumer. So if you have, for instance, a hardware product that's medically related, if there's some way you can spin that as a health kit, Apple Watch, get healthier positioning, I've seen people do that successfully. So it's definitely, you got to get creative, right? But if the people you're going into have a 2-year sales cycle and that's what you're trying to challenge, you better have 2 years of capital in the bank to blow, because after 2 years, you know what, that they want it or that they don't. You don't even, it takes you that long. So let's talk a little bit about the other side of the equation, which is getting a product to market. So Chip, you've shipped 150 plus products in your career, including some of the first Xbox games. What do you tell people who are coming to you and are saying, okay, I've got the market, I need to get into market really, really quickly? What are your tips there from a product side?
A lot of the stuff I have dovetails nicely in what the Jim said. It's, once you have those features, is build quickly, launch quickly, and fail quickly. It's important. Failing quickly it's not then you know how to change, react to that change. A lot of times people will have all these features that they have to have. And so they're building this gigantic castle, let's just say. And what they really just need is a hut right now to get it out into the market, get that product out, see if people like it, see if people are interacting with it. Then you're on to something. And if you put something out there and maybe it's not what they want, but they're giving you feedback, that'll help you then spin up something also, do an update to it, your product, website, mobile app. It applies to all of these. And so Jim referred to it. I worked with some customers. This is one of the first things I had to deal with when I was working with the Xbox games was we were building a hockey game from scratch, and we were taking on EA, who is the gorilla in the room. And we thought we had to have every feature, but there's no way we could have every feature with them. I also had a client that I worked with one time and goes, I have 100 features that need to be in the MVP. That's not an MVP. That's a product. That is a final product. So you just want to, like Jim was saying, you got to have your must-haves, nice-haves, and the maybes. Just maybes are off the board right away for that first thing to get off. The must-have things you need in there is going to tell you, what the customer wants. Are they going to buy this? Is it easy to use? Those things you want to test, get them out there, and then you can build on it. With this being in digital now, you can build on these things. It doesn't all have to be their day one. Amazon was not their day one. Go into the archives and see their webpage. It was just a tiny webpage, and it grew and it grew and it grew. That's what you need to do as well. So get out there, get the product, get your features, get out there to launch, and start looking at how they're using it, asking your customer questions, so you can find out what you don't know, what you need to know, and the feedback, and then bring it back in and do another iteration and go back at it. So I'll throw that. Any questions on that one, Dustin?
No, I think you said it really well, and I'd follow up and say, this 100 feature thing really does happen, and it's really when you want to change the world, it's really easy to try to do more because you're initially starting out trying to do something that's so big and so huge. And it's so easy to think about ways that you could solve that problem. But if you don't narrow it down and get to market quickly, you're not going to learn where you're wrong. And there's hubris involved in that. And it's great when you're leaving your job to believe in yourself. But as soon as you leave your job, your belief in yourself needs to be tempered by the reality that you aren't the paying customer. And even if you were the paying customer, you don't know how many of you there are, and you need to learn. So really, this is about lean methodology and getting to market really, really quickly. We had a client, and it was a Fortune 1000 client. And their initial take on building their mobile app was to literally copy every feature from their 10-year-old website. And they had about 900 features in their spreadsheet that they wanted to attack. And they didn't have the resources to build that. And they were a Fortune 1000. Or to Chip's point, he was at Microsoft, right? Well-funded company, building a very important initiative for them. And they didn't have the resources to build every feature that they wanted. So it's really important to be absolutely ruthless about your feature list and ask yourself not what do I want this to be, but what could it be and still be possible to make a change in the world? Because as soon as you get into that point, ship it, because you're going to learn things. You're going to learn that it doesn't have the impact that you have, or that's all you needed. That's rare, but it does happen. So
we used to say
too, since we're
one last thing, Dustin, we used to say it really doesn't start until you ship. Because if you're just in the back room building this thing, you're not really working on it. Get it out there, and then you're really working on the project.
Yeah, I often refer to it as a marathon. I know you run marathon ship, and I say, shipping is the starting line, not the finish line.
Yeah.
Everything up to shipping is just training. So training is important, but it's the marathon that really gets you to success. So